Good luck, everybody. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Teams Live event to launch the second round of the Carbon Innovation Fund. We're really excited that you're here. I'm Sarah, one of the funding officers, and I've been working on the Carbon Innovation Fund project team since November 2021. I can see people are coming into the space, so we just want to make the most of our time together. So I'll just mention some housekeeping items before we get started properly. I mentioned this is a Teams Live event. It's our first Teams Live event as a team, so please bear with us. But that should mean that everyone is on mute with your video off. This is not because we don't want to see your lovely faces. We were just hoping that in using this tech, it will reduce any problems you may have with audio and visuals. If we've got anyone that might struggle with hearing or just prefers it, you can switch on the captions option. So there should be a small box on the bottom right hand of your screen. You should see a little tiny box with two small C's in there. If you click this, it should turn on the captions. Oh, apparently we've had issues. The sound has gone. Just bear with us 1 second while we try and figure out what's going wrong. I don't know whether you can hear me yet. We're just checking with our tech team to see if you can hear me yet. Oh,
Hi,
Yeah,
Sarah. If you
Sarah.
just keep going, I'm going to go and test this now. It could be a localized issue or it could be a wider problem. So keep going. I'll be back in a minute.
thanks, Eleanor. Eleanor's our wonderful tech person, so she will, hopefully sort it out, and hopefully it's a local problem. Well, we've already hit the worst. You've already not been able to hear me. We're going to move on and keep going. But we do, hopefully you can hear, we do want to make sure that you're able to still engage with the session. So hopefully at the top of your screen, you can see that we have a Q&A channel. If you have any questions during the session, please pop them in the Q&A channel with your email address. We have set aside some time at the end of the webinar after the break to answer as many of your questions as we can. But if we don't get to all of them today, or if your question is quite specific or technical to your project, we will email you with a response after the webinar. Please don't worry, we're not going to publish your email. It won't be seen by anyone else apart from the project team, and the questions won't be published. It's just so that it's due to the tech on this event, basically. It's the only way you can ask questions, and we will respond to you afterwards if we don't get to you in today's session. We're kind of expecting a lot of questions about whether your project is eligible. That's kind of the point of the session, right? But the team are going to talk you through the eligibility criteria this morning. That'll hopefully clarify the answers that you need, but we do think that a really good sense check is to have a look at the application questions. And if you have a natural answer to each of those questions, then it's a really good indication of whether we think your project is eligible or not. The guidance notes and application questions were published on our website last week. We'll pop the link in the Q&A channel. If, like me, you take a bit of time to think about things, a question might pop into your head after today's session. So please remember that you can always email us at foundation@coop.co.uk and we'll come back to you. We'll also pop that email into the question and answer. This session is going to be recorded for anyone that's unable to make it today, or if you'd like to refer back to it, so please be aware of this. We will upload the recording to our website within the next couple of days. Emily, if you could just move the slide along, please. That's brilliant, thank you very much. This slide just gives you a quick overview of how today's session is going to run. The team are going to talk you through the ins and outs of the fund, including, as we've said, the eligibility, but for things like assessment criteria, the timelines, and the learning and impact we're hoping for. We'll then have a short break before returning to answer any questions that come through. But before all of that, I'm going to pass over to Nick, who's our CEO of the Co-op Foundation, just to say a few words. Thanks, Nick.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Expertly navigated through the sound issues there. I'm Nick Crofts. I'm the Chief Exec at the Co-op Foundation. We are proud to be the Co-op's charity. We're a grant maker and we are a campaigning organisation. And as the Co-op's charity, we're also proud to be working with them to cooperate for a fairer world. We believe that cooperation is at the heart of strong communities, and this makes us a different kind of funder. When we developed our new strategy last year, we asked 100 young people to shape our new vision and to tell us what they see as fair and cooperative communities of the future. They are tomorrow's leaders, activists, and pioneers, after all. And it was no surprise that these young visionaries told us loud and clear that sustainability has got to be a key priority in the future, which of course is why it is solidly one of our 6 strategic pillars. It's crucial for us to recognise the climate crisis as a foundation, and that's why I'm very excited to be here to talk to you, the potential applicants to our newest fund, the Carbon Innovation Fund. This is a partnership between us at the Co-op Foundation and the Co-op food business, putting the money from Co-op food stores from the sale of the green compostable carrier bags to good use. And of course, since we're partnering with the Co-op on this one, we're after amazing projects specifically from the food and farming sector. Our team of Aruna, Zoff, Sarah, Asamina and Karen are here today to talk you through everything there is to know about the Carbon Innovation Fund, what we're looking for, how to apply, the process, the timescales, and more importantly, to answer any questions or discussion points that you have today. I'm also absolutely delighted that Aditi has joined us. Aditi is our climate philanthropy expert from an organisation called Impatience Earth. She has helped us every step of the way, and Aditi, we are incredibly grateful for your continuous support. So that's enough from me. I will now pass on to the wonderful Zofia to talk you through the fund in more detail. So Zoff, the floor is yours.
Hello everybody, my name's Zoff. I'm a funding officer and I've been working on the Carbon Innovation Fund since it launched in November 2022. Emily, could we have the next slide please? I think we might need to be one more on from that one. Great, brilliant, thank you. So the fund itself is a 3-year, £3.5 million partnership between ourselves and Co-op, and it's funded by the money raised from the sale of Co-op's compostable bags and our own funds as well. So last year, for our pilot year, we funded some amazing initiatives working to reduce the environmental impact of the food and farming sector. And as a team, we were really struck by the number of fantastic organisations out there doing really innovative and inspiring things. So in order to develop round 2 of the fund, we reflected, reviewed and consulted with experts in the field, and we decided that round 2 should take a more focused approach, which we hope will allow for deeper impact, better synergy between partners, and will generate a wealth of learning that can be openly shared. As a result of the consultation process to test out different focus ideas with a panel of industry experts, we decided to dedicate this year's funding initiatives to reducing the UK's reliance on soy-based animal and fish feed and/or synthetic fertilisers. So your project could concentrate on one of the themes or on both of them. Whilst developing the fund, we looked at the spiralling costs and environmental damage associated with the feed and fertilisers for farmers, which I'm sure everyone has seen in the news. And as a result, we've seen an influx of interest and innovation in affordable and sustainable alternatives to feed and fertiliser, as well as ideas which will help reduce our reliance on them altogether. Some of these ideas demonstrate cutting-edge technology, whilst others bring back increasingly well understood benefits of traditional techniques. So we're thinking of things, for example, like regenerative farming approaches. To us, both types of work are innovative as they work against the mainstream approaches of today. Now, we completely understand that banning soy and synthetic fertilizers overnight is not viable, as it would collapse our food systems. However, these new ideas and alternatives will bring a whole host of benefits. So, for example, reducing deforestation rates, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, they'll help farmers' livelihoods and protect biodiversity. So, with this in mind, the aim of the second round of the Carbon Innovation Fund is to decrease farmers' reliance on soy-based feed and synthetic fertilisers through funding projects and trials, whilst encouraging collaboration that further tests and scales up innovative solutions. And you can read a bit more about this in our guidance notes. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's the one. So, a little bit more information about grant size, number of grants and the amount of funding. Applicants can apply for between £75,000 and £100,000 for their project. We're also hoping to fund some formal partnerships this year. Partnerships can apply for up to £200,000. And something to note here is that there must be a lead applicant who will receive the funding, and there needs to be a contract or memorandum of understanding in place between the partner organisations. Now, we understand that for new partnerships, this won't be in place initially, but we will ask to see it before we release the funding for successful partnerships. The funding itself can be used on project costs, core costs, or overheads and capital costs. Projects must start within 6 months of receiving the grant, but can be spent over any time period. So, for example, our round one partners range between 1 and 4 years. We can also offer successful applicants, except for private limited companies, up to £5,000 of additional funding, and that's to support capacity building needs in their organisation. So a few examples of this could be training, development and strategic thinking. The important thing is that it builds the capacity of the organisation rather than being project specific, and there's a section in the application form where you can request this additional amount. We plan to fund between 5 and 10 organisations across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. However, the number of organisations funded will depend on how many formal partnerships we have requiring the higher rates of funding. And this year, sadly, we won't be funding projects overseas, as our focus is on the UK farming specifically. Next slide, please. So in terms of who can apply, any type of organisation of any size based in the UK is welcome to apply to the Carbon Innovation Fund. However, to be funded, you must be able to evidence that your work does not solely lead to private gain. You need to commit to open source sharing of information, processes and learning, and by this we mean your work isn't protected by intellectual property rights. Your organisation needs to be legally constituted, have a bank account in the organisation's legal name, and have at least 2 unconnected people on the board or management committee. By unconnected, we mean people who are not related or married. You'll need to be able to evidence a pilot of the work that you plan to carry out for your funded project. However, you don't need to have carried out the pilot yourself. You also need to carry out your proposed project in the UK. Now, if you're a co-op supplier, you are welcome to apply for funding, providing you score well against the criteria in the following slides. We do plan to ring fence up to £100,000 to fund the highest scoring supplier. Now, other suppliers may be funded, but they will not be given priority over other applicants. So they'll all be in the same pot. We recognise that small to medium organisations often struggle to access funding when compared to larger organisations. So with this in mind, we'll prioritise smaller organisations when 2 applicants have scored equally during the shortlisting process. And as previously mentioned, we do welcome applications from organisations working in partnership. Now that includes projects joining up with statutory organisations and involving voluntary public and private sector organisations. All organisations involved in a formal partnership must meet the criteria listed above and provide evidence of partnership. As previously mentioned, this needs to be in the form of a contract or memorandum of understanding. It's also worth reiterating that organisations working in formal partnerships can apply for up to £200,000. One organisation needs to be the lead and the legal recipient of the grant. Now I'll pass on to Aruna, who's going to talk about our scoring criteria in more detail.
Thank you, Zoff. Can we just go on to the next slide, please, Emily? My name's Aruna and I am the funding manager for the Carbon Innovation Fund, and I've been working on this fund since its launch in 2021. So lovely to see lots of you on the webinar today. So hopefully, as you're aware, the fund opens today and we can accept applications from midday, so just over 40 minutes time, midday today, right up until midday on the 28th of February. So that means the application window is open for the entire month of February. So the application questions can be found on our website if you want to have a look at them or draft your answers before actually starting your application on the portal. So you can see on this slide here that we've actually split our funding criteria up, and it's split up into essential and desirable elements. You will notice that the questions on the application form map directly over to each of these criteria. So those deemed as essential, so the top three you can see on the slide here, are actually weighted heavier during the scoring process than those that are desirable, for obvious reasons. So please note you must be able to comfortably answer the essential questions in order to be funded and be eligible. So we hope you may also be able to answer a number of those that are desirable, but we do appreciate that not every project can address each of these criteria, nor would we want you to shoehorn things into your projects just for the sake of meeting our needs. So just to talk to you a little bit more about the actual criteria. So as you can see at the top, we've got the essential here. So demonstrating reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So by this, what we mean is you must be able to clearly explain how your work will help to cut greenhouse gas emissions by reducing reliance on soy feed or synthetic fertiliser. So if possible, we'd like you to provide evidence or a methodology, but please note that the evidence doesn't have to be your own. It could be published by someone else and you just have to point us in the right direction in your answer on the application form. The next essential criteria is awareness of knock-on effects. So we're really conscious that often in the quest to solve one problem, there is a risk in creating another. So we'd really like to get an idea of any adverse social or environmental or other consequences that you anticipate that your work might have. So we know that most projects will have some knock-on consequences, and it may feel strange that we're asking you about adverse consequences in your application form, but we do ask that you are open and honest in sharing these challenges alongside potential mitigation techniques. So please remember that this is an innovation fund, so we do have a healthy appetite for risk and we do want to hear all about the nitty-gritty of your projects. So the final essential criteria is collaboration and cooperation. So you can demonstrate here that how you will cooperate with others, and this could be at any or at every stage of your project. So it could be things like co-designing and delivering the project to sharing learnings and benefits with others. I know we've said this once, but I'll say again that it's essential that learnings are made open source and your project does not involve any patent or intellectual property rights that might lead to private gain. So that's the essential criteria. Moving on to the desirable, environmental benefits sort of does what it says on the tin here. We would like to know how your project might contribute to the environment, obviously beyond the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that we will have asked you about earlier in the application. So for example, it could be something like increased local biodiversity measured using the biodiversity metric calculator tool, something like that. Human benefits would also be interested in projects that benefit people. So this section could relate to the general community or a very specific group of people. So for example, this could be providing employment, volunteering opportunities, or simply a reduced cost of inputs for farmers. The next one is impact and legacy. So we'd like to understand what the impact of your project will be during the grant lifetime and its reach. So the reach could be local, national or UK wide. And we'd also like to know if there's an opportunity for long-lasting legacy with your project. By that we mean beyond the funded project lifetime. And we'd like to know what you expect that legacy to be. Finally, we've got scalability. So we'd be really interested to understand how your work could potentially be scaled up in order to increase impact and benefit. We'd be especially interested to see how your initiatives to reduce our reliance on commercial feed and fertiliser can take affordability into account when scaling up, as we know that this is such a huge challenge. So that's all of the criteria. It's worth mentioning that for those that make the shortlist but are unfortunately ultimately unsuccessful, we do help to be able to share your applications with other funders who might be able to support. So you'll see in the application form that we actually ask you permission to do so at the start. And then a final point just on applications. When you actually submit your application, when you finished it, you will be sent a copy to your email address. If you can't see this, then please check your junk email as it may go in there. Can we go on to the next slide, please, Emily? So in the next slide, we're talking about what we can fund. Yeah, it matches up. So we're looking to fund a range of different mechanisms which can help reduce our reliance on feed and fertiliser. Some examples are listed on this slide below, but please don't feel constrained by these examples. It's an innovation fund, so we're ready to hear your ideas. We want to hear about things that we've never heard about before. So some examples here are alternatives to soy-based animal or fish feed, obviously, and alternatives to synthetic fertiliser. Or it could be ideas which reduce the negative impacts of synthetic fertiliser. Additionally, we could fund on-farm trials of alternative feed or fertiliser, which will measure success and impacts on measures such as yield, costs, biodiversity increases, nitrogen management, etc. And then finally, probably more innovatively, thinking laterally, so to actually reduce reliance rather than create alternatives. So by this, what we mean is thinking about breeding new strains of crops, better nitrate management on farms, building multi-stakeholder networks to tackle issues together, and potentially things like agroecological cluster demonstration projects. The list goes on and on, but we're ready to hear about your ideas and we're excited to do so as well. Next slide, please, Emily, just to look at things that we actually can't fund. Thank you. So this list is far more prescriptive than the last. Things that we can't fund are policy and lobbying initiatives. We can't fund new ideas without any sort of pilot or trial that's been taking place in the first instance. So again, in the application form, you'll see that we actually ask about the pilot, whether you carried it out or not. We would like some information about the pilot. We can't fund projects that can't commit to open source sharing. As you know, this is really important to us, can't stress it enough. So that includes work on patenting and intellectual property. We can't fund projects focusing on feed additives instead of reducing reliance on soy specifically. We also can't fund projects which do not support farmers directly. So by this, we mean things like developing meat alternatives. We can't fund retrospective projects and costs. And finally, we can't fund projects taking place outside of the UK. And then we'll go on to the next slide, please, where I will talk through process and timings. Just get it open on my own screen as well. Thanks, Emily. So as you can see on this slide, hopefully you can see highlighted in yellow. Obviously, we're in the launch webinar right now and the application's open today. Obviously, I've said that the applications will close on the 28th of February at the end of the month. The ball is then in our court to actually score those applications, which we will do by the end of March. We will share the outcome with you, whether you are successful and shortlisted or unsuccessful. For those that are shortlisted, we will then invite them to share some additional information with us. So this will be detailed project plans, due diligence information, and some thoughts on learning and evaluation as well. The deadline to share that additional information will be around the week commencing the 10th of April. And then again, it's on us to perform our due diligence checks ahead of assessment calls. So the assessment calls will be 30 minutes or so with each of the shortlisted applicants. And really, this will be quite an informal chat with one of the Carbon Innovation Fund teams, so myself, Sof or Sarah. And it's just to get to know you and your project a little bit better. We know that you can really bring things to life when you speak verbally and meet people. So we just wanted to give all shortlisted applicants the chance to do that. We will then prepare all the information to and send on to our expert decision panel, which will take place week commencing 19th of June. They will make the final decisions and we'll be able to share those with the shortlist within a couple of days. And then we're moving into the summer where we can organise things like grant agreements with our successful funded partners. We can start awarding grants and dispersing some money. And also we can publicly announce our funded partners as well. You'll see that the final point on this process and timings list is referrals into co-op supply chain. And I'm actually going to pass on to Karen, who is Senior Sustainability Manager at Co-op Food, to talk to you a little bit more about that.
Brilliant, thanks Aruna. If you could move on one slide, please. And firstly, just to introduce myself as well. So my name's Karen Fisher. I work for the Co-op Food business. I have responsibility for all our environmental sustainability targets, of which there are many, but notably we have an incredibly ambitious, incredibly challenging, but incredibly important target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we know that more than 90% of our emissions footprint lies in our supply chain. So working with suppliers on ways to reduce those emissions is critical. And we're looking at a number of mechanisms to do that. But this Carbon Innovation Fund, and particularly this round of funding, we're just delighted to be working with the Co-op Foundation team on, because it could be a really important part of that mix for us. So there's two ways in which we're looking to involve suppliers. So firstly, as has been mentioned already, co-op suppliers are very welcome to apply directly. Hello, I'm so sorry, am I back?
You are
Yes,
back.
You are back.
That's yeah, very unfortunate. I'm so sorry about that. And you probably had me in a weird face pose. I think I was on the point of saying that other suppliers may apply and may also be awarded funding, obviously dependent and subject to the criteria that Aruna was talking about earlier. So the other way that we are piloting in this round is an initiative to bring together non-supplier applicants with co-op suppliers. And really the intention is to try and identify some mutually beneficial opportunities here. So in practice, we're hoping this could result in, for example, a co-op supplier and a funded partner working together to enhance or scale the project that has been selected, or simply just making that introduction so that those two parties could work together in the future on completely different opportunities separate to the Carbon Innovation funded project. So essentially a matchmaking service. In terms of practicalities of how we might do that, I think it's fair to say that it will be somewhat case by case dependent on the applications received. But at the initial stage in the process, applicants will be asked if they would consider the option of collaborating with a co-op supplier. I should state quite clearly that there is no obligation to do so, and there will be no preference given to applicants that state that preference. However, certainly we would like to indicate at that stage. And then on successful applicants being selected, we will make an introduction to those between those applicants and potentially interested co-op suppliers. So that might be a supplier or a group of suppliers, again, case by case, dependent on the context. And really what we're looking to do is make that introduction and enable that conversation to progress further and separately if it feels mutually rewarding, with no obligation. We also recognise that at that stage that might mean some changes to the plans and timings, and absolutely we'd be looking to have flexibility to enable that. But I should note that at that stage we can't award additional funding. And I guess the final point, just to make clear, is that we can't guarantee that this relationship, this collaboration will be possible for all applications, but absolutely we intend to try our hardest to make it successful. And I shall pass on, I think, now to talk more about learning and evaluation.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Massimina Vergu. I'm the head of learning and impact at the Co-op Foundation. Cooperation is at the heart of what we do, and that applies to our approach to learning and evaluation. And learning is at the heart of our new strategy. So we really put a lot of emphasis of how we work with our funded partners on, collating learnings from what we fund and our project activities. I would like to highlight that when I talk about the learning and impact approach that we have, there are two levels in it. So there is the overall funding program level that we want to gather learning and improve how we fund our projects. And there's also the project level evaluation and learning, where individual projects within our funding program look at their own learning and impact within the project activities. And what I'm going to say now covers both kind of levels. So one thing to emphasize, we consider learning and evaluation predominantly for learning to improve rather than accountability. And we are willing and very passionate about resourcing it appropriately. So we expect that 5% of your project staff time will go towards learning and evaluation activities. We would like to see more information on your preliminary ideas about learning and evaluation to be included in the detailed project plan that we're going to ask as part of the second stage of applications. And as expectations, we do hope to see a learning and impact report to be submitted at the end of your project. So in order to support all our projects in our kind of learning and evaluation approaches, we are in the process of commissioning a learning partner who will contextualize the Carbon Innovation Fund within the wider farming sector. The learning partner will be conducting a landscape analysis in the beginning of their commissioning, which will inform our decision making for the projects that we're going to fund. The learning partners are going to support our partners in developing your learning questions and your approach. We'll be building peer learning communities amongst our projects. And we'll also support us, the funders, to improve our funding approach. We are also, willing and very passionate about learning. How can we fund and support our partners better in the future? So our learning and evaluation approach overall is going to be flexible. We expect we hope our funded partners will co-design our approach and will participate in our learning and evaluation activities. We will support you as partners to develop your own project learning and evaluation capacity approach to improve your project during your duration, and to use evidence eventually to scale up your project activities and for future fundraising as well. So 3 things I would like to take away from my short kind of taster of what we hope to achieve with our learning and impact approach is first, learning and evaluation is not predominantly for accountability, but it is for learning and improving our projects. Second, we are resourcing it appropriately, and we hope to see a relevant budget line when you submit your proposal. And, overall, we have these 2 levels of evaluation, which we hope to integrate nicely and to work together cooperatively with our partners to learn, share learnings on what works, what doesn't, and what we can do better in the future. Thank you. I will pass over back to Aruna.
Thanks, Asimina. That was great. Okay, I'm going to announce a break now for 10 minutes. We're bang on time, so we're going to come back at 11:45. So you've got time to stretch your legs, get a cup of tea, but also if you have any questions, please remember to post them in the Q&A box. We've seen plenty of questions already come through. One thing I'd just like to remind you of is to pop your email address alongside your question. Just in case we don't get to it today, we will email you back after this webinar, and we won't be sharing that email with anybody else. It's just us that can see it, just for security. But apart from that, I'll see you in 10 minutes and we'll be answering any questions. Thank you.
Well done, excellent presentations.
Yeah, I thought that was already clear.
Just a reminder that attendees will be able to hear us.
Hello everyone, welcome back. Hope you've managed to get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, whatever your drink of choice is. We're going to take some time now to answer some questions that have come through. Just a quick reminder, thank you to everybody who sent in your email address. If we don't get to your question today, if you supplied your email address, we will come back to you after the session. We've got about 20 minutes to answer questions, so we're going to go through some of them. And if not, we will come back to you. So we're going to, yes, next slide, please, Emily. We are going to kick off with a question, and I'm going to pass this over to Aruna. The question is, half of my project looks at alternative fertiliser, but the other half looks at other environmental benefits. Could I apply for funding, or would the entire project need to focus on fertiliser?
Thanks, Sarah. So in short, yes, the answer is you definitely could apply for funding. It sounds very positive. If only half of your project works on fertiliser, I think what we would like to know is what the other half of your project is doing. But it sounds like if it's environmental benefits, that actually hits one of our criteria. So we'd just like to know what the consequences of that are, if there's any impacts. But yeah, I would say overall, absolutely can apply.
Yeah, looking forward to reading it. So the next one is from some very busy people. The question is, can an organisation submit more than one application? So I'm going to pass this over to Zoff.
Thanks, Sarah. So yes, you can submit more than one application, although we would say that it's unlikely that we would fund more than one application from the same organisation, as we kind of want to spread out the funding opportunities for everybody.
Brilliant, thanks, Zoff. The next one is around our suppliers. So the question is, are co-op suppliers given preference over anyone else? And I'm going to pass that over to Aruna.
Thanks, Sarah. So yes, as we mentioned in the presentation, there is one grant of 100k reserved for the highest scoring co-op supplier. So it's likely that they'll be funded, obviously pending agreement from the expert decision panel at the end. The rest of any co-op supplier applications will go through exactly the same competitive process as all the other applications. So please don't think, that our top funded projects are just going to be co-op suppliers. You will all be treated the same, bar one.
Brilliant, thank you very much. The next one's about the proportion of projects that we're going to be funded. So Zoff, if I could ask you, will you be funding 50% feed projects and 50% fertiliser projects?
Okay, so this won't be an exact science, as it really kind of depends on the applications that we get through. I think what we're going to do is, once we've shortlisted the top 20 projects, we'll have a look and see if we've got a good mix of feed and fertiliser, and we'll do our best to put forward a high quality mix of applications to the expert panel. However, it may be that we fund more feed projects, for example, meet our criteria, in which case we'll fund slightly more of them.
Brilliant. And following on from that question and that answer, we've had a question about who makes the final decision on the fund. So Aruna, who will be making the final decisions about who gets funded?
Yeah, so we'll use the same approach as we did last year. So the final decision panel will be made up of a foundation trustee, a senior colleague in sustainability at Co-op Food. We'll have an industry expert on feed and fertiliser, and then we'll also have an environmental philanthropy expert and a farmer that has a good understanding of how these approaches will actually work on the ground. So we actually present them, myself, Zoff and Sarah present them with all of the information that they need, and they're the ones that make the decisions. So we're very happy that we don't have to make the decisions, because we'd never be able to choose. We leave it to the expert decision panel.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question is from one of our SIF1 partners. So can partners that already have funding from round 1 of the fund apply for round 2? I'm going to pass this one over to Zoff.
Okay, so in theory, yes, as long as the project meets the criteria. The project obviously needs to be based in the UK, but it also needs to be different to the project that was previously funded. And that's the key here, that it needs to be a different and separate project.
Brilliant, thanks, Zoff. One that's a bit more technical, Aruna, so I'm going to pass over to you. Will we fund projects developing alternatives to chemical pesticides or insecticides?
So no, not if it's solely looking at pesticides. We're obviously looking at fertilisers and feed with this fund. But if, for example, you're looking at an alternative fertiliser and within your project you're also looking at pesticides, that would be fine.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And another question I'm going to pass over to Zof. Why aren't we funding overseas this year?
Okay, the overseas category was extremely competitive last year, and this year our budgets are slightly reduced. We also need to acknowledge that the foundation is a UK funder, so we felt it would be unfair to open up applications worldwide if we could potentially only fund one project.
Thank you very much. We're really disappointed in that, but we're really looking forward to working with our UK partners this year. So the next one is around applying as a partnership. So Aruna, if somebody is applying as a partnership, do they have to have a contract or a partnership agreement in place already?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if it's a new partnership on your application, we obviously wouldn't expect you to have the agreement in place at the application stage. But within the application form, there is plenty of space for you to tell us all about your plans for partnership together. Then if you are shortlisted, we may ask you for more information about the partnership, and we'd invite your partners to actually join in on that assessment call as well to meet them too. And then finally, if you make it through to the expert decision panel, and if you're successful as a funded partner, at that point, we would expect a contract or an agreement in place before we can actually release any funds. So different levels depending on what stage you get to.
Brilliant, thanks, Aruna. And Zof, we've got a question come in about what sort of monitoring should we expect during the grant lifetime?
Okay, so our approach to monitoring is that we sort of approach it on a case-by-case basis. So it depends on things like the size of the organisation and the levels of support that the organisation feels that it might need. I would say, as a rough guide, at the very least, we would have an informal phone call, sort of check in every 6 months just to see how things are going, discuss any challenges, any changes. It's a really informal call, but you would have sort of constant dialogue with your funding manager throughout the lifetime of the grant anyway. They'll be available to speak to. At the end of the grant lifetime, we'll ask for a formal piece of monitoring, which could be submitted in any format. So it could be a report, a presentation, or a song, if you feel so inclined. The important thing is that it answers our core questions. So we don't really mind what format it comes in, as long as it focuses on the questions. And as Asamina mentioned earlier, there'll be a learning and impact report to complete at the end of the grant. And we would make sure there's no overlap in the questions that asks and questions that we ask during the kind of routine grant monitoring.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm really hoping somebody does submit their final monitoring in a song. That would be great. The next question is around are we happy for our funding to go towards a larger package? So the question is, are you equally happy for funding to go towards a larger funding package, or do you prefer to fund a whole project? And if part of a larger package, should the funding be secured already? I'm going to pass this one over to Aruna, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yes, we're more than happy to be one of many funders of a larger package, so that's absolutely fine. We've got a couple of round one partners where we are one of many funders, and we like to collaborate on things like that, so that's absolutely fine. Does the funding need to be secure? I would say no, but please do tell us about this in your application form. Tell us about who you've applied to and when you expect to get the decision by, just so that we have a really good understanding of where you're at.
Yeah, brilliant. And the next one we've got in is around the kind of split across the UK. So do we have any preference as to whether projects take place across the whole of the UK, or is it okay if they're just in one country, for example, Scotland? I'm going to pass this one back to Aruna again.
Yeah, no, we don't have a preference at all. Obviously, as Zof said earlier, we do plan to fund proportionately. So if you're in Scotland, you'll go into the Scotland shortlist, and the same for Northern Ireland, Wales and England. But yeah, absolutely no preference, and we hope to fund across the 4 nations.
Looking forward to it. Zof, given that we are going to prioritise smaller organisations if they score equally over larger ones, do we have a sense of what size of organisation we would consider to be large?
Okay, yes, we've had a couple of questions on that one, I think, about the size of organisations. We don't have a definition for this. What we would define smaller and larger by is the size of turnover. So it really depends on the size of organisations that apply. And to kind of give you an example, if two organisations have scored the same, when we're shortlisting, we would look at the organisation with the least turnover to make that decision.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And another bit of a specific one, I guess. So are UK universities eligible to apply as a lead partner?
I would say yes, they're eligible to apply as long as they meet the rest of the criteria.
Brilliant. Got a bit more of a technical one, so I'm going to throw this out to Aruna. Will increasing carbon stocks in soil be recognised as well as reducing greenhouse gases?
That's an interesting one. So what I would say is carbon sequestration or increasing carbon stocks would actually be recognised against the wider environmental benefits criteria. So whatever your project is, it's clearly meeting that one. But we would also like to hear about the greenhouse gas emission reduction in the first instance as part of the essential criteria. I hope that's clear.
Brilliant, thank you. And to Zaf, how long do our partners have to deliver the project, please? So when do we want the project completion by?
Right, well, we don't actually have any time frame, so the project can kind of, in theory, last as long as you want. To give you a bit of an idea, our SIF1 partners, the projects sort of range between 1 and 4 years. You need to start the project within 6 months of signing the grant agreement, but I guess it depends on how far you can make potentially £100,000 or a £200,000 stretch. So yeah, no time limit on that at all.
Brilliant, thanks, Zaf. And to Aruna, can you clarify what you mean by core cost / overhead support versus project support? Do they have to apply for a specific project, or can organisations apply for general operational overheads if their work fits the guidelines?
Yeah, good question. So Carbon Innovation Fund funding is for projects. So you would need to apply, if you're looking at just funding overheads, you could still apply if you applied with your projects and you asked for 100k, for example, to cover your overheads. We'd obviously expect that you then probably have another funder that's covering the capital costs, etc. of your project. We've got no problem with covering overheads, but it would need to be associated with a project specifically. Again, I hope that's clear. If it's not, please email us and we can arrange a call.
Brilliant. And I think possibly the last question for now, will you fund projects that are already partially funded? And I'm going to throw this back to Aruna.
Yeah, I think we covered that one earlier. Yes, we absolutely can cover projects that are already partially funded, and we're happy to do so.
Brilliant, thanks Aruna. I appreciate we're a little bit early, but there was a lot of questions and a lot of answers in there, and there are an awful lot of more questions coming through. What I would say is just a reminder, if you could attach your email address please to your question on the question and answer channel, we will come back to you. They just seem to be getting a little bit more technical, and we need to take the time to read them through properly and give you the proper answer. So just want to thank everybody for coming to the webinar this morning. We're going to give you 15 minutes back of your time. Like I say, we're not ignoring your questions. We will come back and answer all of them. The recording from this webinar will be on our website in the next few days. The application form is now open, which is very exciting, and you can find the guidance notes and the application questions already on our website. If you still have questions that haven't been popped into the chat, please email us at foundation@coop.co.uk and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Thank you so much for attending. We're really excited to see what the applications are going to be, and we're looking forward to working with you all. Thank you. Bye.